Uh, Basically, the events which have happened yesterday on 9th November 2022. Yesterday it was designated as Finance Day. So each day there is a thematic day. So the meetings, subcommittee workshops, various other activities are built around this theme every day. So yesterday it was Finance Day, and most of the activities were related to finance. Of course, this COP, unlike previous COP, is focusing more on finance. Basically, because of the pressure put by African nations, they even before COP, this meeting at Sharm el Sheikh, African countries they met several times, and that's how the agenda included loss and damage as part of the agenda. And also, finance became a critical discussion point. Even yesterday and the day before, some meetings happened on various aspects related to Paris Agreement, but even there, including global goal on adaptation, even on mitigation. So every major objective of Paris Agreement included funding, and so whatever discussions were happening, ultimately it was pushed into funding issue as well. So there, I think if you remember yesterday, there was a report which was brought out which mentioned that of the $100 billion goal, this was announced in Paris, and every year that is going to be added. So this goal has not reached its level to the level of funding. So basically, major countries like US fallen back, and they have not paid not even a single pie to this $100 billion goal. So in the backdrop of that, and then pressure on developed countries, especially those countries which are been historically adding to carbon emissions to the environment and greenhouse gases. So they have been under pressure to respond with finance. So yesterday there was this high-level ministerial dialogue on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. That's the title. So it says high-level ministerial dialogue on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. So the title itself shows that there is a collectively quantified goal, and that still continues to be $100 billion, even though there are now different assessments which have come up with much higher levels of finance requirement. So again, yesterday we discussed, one report said to include loss and damage, adaptation, mitigation of most countries, developing countries like mostly Africa and Asia. The finance required is $1 trillion, $1 trillion every year. So even until 2050. So almost we are looking at $28 trillion of funds which are required. But now the COP27 negotiations are stuck at still $100 billion goal. So this high-level ministerial dialogue, which included all the top officials, including UNFCCC Executive Secretary Simon Steele. He spoke about not to repeat the mistakes which happened with regard to the $100 billion goal. And he was underscoring transparency and accountability. Now, this, he says, transparency and accountability will ensure trust building and to make informed investment decisions. Now, this is another contentious issue where and how the investment decisions will be made. So, even if the money comes, how does that money get spent? I think that question is being asked by developed countries and also developing countries. And Kristalina Georgieva, she is a managing director of International Monetary Fund. This is part of the Bretton Woods institutions, sister organization of World Bank. So she wanted clarity on the scale of investment needs and on the definition of climate finance. So which is reasonable because even India has asked that, and many other countries have also flagged that issue of defining climate finance. What does it mean, and what is its scope of finance? And second is what she was mentioning, the scale of investment needs. So how much, I think that's what she is trying to bring in. Of course, there are various reports and assessments, but I think it has to be more official kind of scale assessment. So I think she is trying to hint at that. But of course, some people see this as basically she's trying to put in some conditions before committing themselves. So maybe we don't know. There are a lot of politics involved behind global finance. So no doubt about that. So she noted the trust being eroded from both unmet funding promises and lack of clarity on how funding is used and with what impacts. So as I mentioned, these financial institutions, they want clarity on where this fund will be used and how it will impact on climate emissions, basically reduction or prevention of carbon emissions. So again, of course, that's a big issue. We are not sure because since there is no agreement on other issues, like fossil fuels, so of course they are going to raise a lot of these issues. So what I think this discussion basically we need to look at it from the point of view of how COP is yet to set a framework for action. I think because there is no framework for action, so people are already demanding funds for that action. So there is now this call for clarity on where and how these funds will be utilized. So as a banker, I think what she is asking looks very plausible and logical. And other ministers also spoke, and they wanted, a guidance mechanism for climate funds. So there were 4 issues which were, summarized by a few people. One, as I mentioned, it is about the goal should be set at a quantitative level. So that reflects the scale of funding needed to achieve the objectives of Paris Agreement. So again, this is not responding to the ambitious goals which tries to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. So this is still limiting itself to Paris Agreement, and probably I think that means $100 billion goal is the only one which is going to be discussed, and not other assessments which are talking of higher finance. And second, broadening the contributor base towards all that are able to contribute. Now, this looks again a kind of Trojan horse. Broadening the contributor base is, basically the word contributor is giving a positive connotation, but I think the sentiment is that the countries which have benefited from activities which have contributed carbon emissions, so those countries have to pay for this. So this is about polluter pays principles. So here you can see that they are using the word contributor rather than polluter, and that are able to contribute. So again, it means the ability of the contributor is being brought into question. So it could mean that it could be positively when you look at if India is is one of the polluting countries, top 4 polluting countries. So whether India will be able to contribute, and what is its capacity to contribute. I think that's, but India, it appears to be a victim as well as a contributor. So we need to, I think those politics around that are going to keep coming back. Special attention to support least developed countries and small island developing states. I think there's no dispute about it. So there is that broad agreement. Mitigating investment risks to increase developing countries' access to private capital. Now, this again looks a little tricky because private capital, one is they look at payback periods, payback margins. So, how do we mitigate investment risks? I think that's still the question. Now, the next one is very important, reforming the Bretton Woods system to ensure climate risk is mainstreamed in finance institutions. So this is where Indian International Monetary Fund and World Bank have to be reformed. That's what the call is for, so that they mainstream finance for climate risk, which also means so far it has not been done. So in this ministerial dialogue, managing director of IMF was there, but not the World Bank. So World Bank president was present in Sharm el Sheikh yesterday, but he was not speaking, rather than a representative from the World Bank president spoke yesterday at that ministerial dialogue. So someone, a journalist, went and asked him, "Are you a climate denier?" Basically, who denies that there is a climate risk or a crisis. But he did not give a straight answer, and he kept walking away. So, this means the Bretton Woods system of institutions, they are still not converted to the fact of a climate crisis and the need to finance the mitigation or adaptation activities under climate crisis. Now, lastly, even yesterday and day before, we discussed that. They said global level debt cancellation initiative to free up developing countries' fiscal space. So yesterday, Mohammad Naushad of Maldives, he said when we are talking of finance, he said most of our funds are going to service the debt, basically paying back the debt which they have, and taking care of civil servant salary. So there is hardly any fund for any positive and mitigation activity. And then, of course, other heads of state also mentioned that they have huge debts. So this demand for a debt cancellation initiative is picking up. So most countries which are in debt, they expect this to be as part of the climate finance. So if they are freed from the debt, I think then they'll be able to provide funds for that. But then I think there will be a lot of issues about mechanisms, the criteria, parameters, and basically transparency information, which anyway was flagged by UNFCCC Executive Secretary. Now, one of the fears which were expressed yesterday was the lack of safeguards built into Article 6.4 mechanism for cooperative implementation of Paris Agreement. This we have been discussing for the past 2 days. Under Article 6.4, this carbon removal activity was discussed, and some recommendations were made by the committee. And those recommendations are being questioned by the civil society and observers who are present in COP27. Then yesterday, I think Dr. Muhammad Mohildin, UN climate change high-level champion for COP27, he issued a statement on finance. So he referred to number of mechanisms. So I'll just briefly touch upon them because all of them are not, basically the negotiations are going on in each of those mechanisms. So he was talking about non-state actors, So every company, bank, insurer, and investor will have to adjust their business models, develop credible plans for transition and implement them. So this call, I thought, is very credible because not only the country and not only the governments, it has to be every company which has to adjust their business models. So this is what we have been discussing in India and also in Hyderabad with Federation of Telangana Chambers of Commerce and Industry, where we wanted the members of FTCCI to come on board and to discuss what can be done. So the world's largest asset owners and managers. So this is basically mutual funds and a lot of these investment managers and who control $37 trillion. So this is a huge amount which is controlled by these asset owners and managers. So they have joined Climate Champions UN-backed Race to Zero campaign. Now this Race to Zero was, there was some visibility to this campaign in COP26 as well. So its aim is to rally leadership and support from cities, regions, investors for a zero carbon recovery. So basically that prevents future threats, create decent jobs and unlocks inclusive sustainable growth. So here, cities like Hyderabad, Delhi, Bombay, they can participate in this, or even states like Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, all the states of India, they can participate, and of course investors, it could be insurance companies or mutual fund companies, banks. So all of them can participate in this Race to Zero campaign, but we are not yet sure who are part of this United Nations backed Race to Zero. So Race to Zero is complete zero emission situation. So there was this, the Dr. Mohammed again refers to Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. This is again an alliance which was formed at COP26, and there are more than 500 members from 51 countries in this alliance. So I think GFANG is focusing on deforestation. So basically, they want to work on afforestation so that the 11% contribution to carbon emissions coming from deforestation and land use, I think that can be reduced. So, but of course, they reduced and also transition to net zero greenhouse gas emissions. So, the recent studies, they say that reforestation and reduced deforestation could yield $6 to $40 trillion in savings. So basically, if you just start reforestation and reduce or stop deforestation, there can be savings in terms of finance. So this is what GFANG is looking at. Then there is this Africa group of negotiators, which is basically alliance of African member states that represents the interests in international climate change negotiations. So they estimated, as I was mentioning, Africa itself, the entire continent requires $3 trillion to implement the nationally determined contributions. So each of the countries which are given NDCs, so that to implement those contributions, they are asking for $3 trillion of funds under the Paris Agreement. But this is way beyond $500 billion only for Africa. So I think I think people will have a heart attack when they keep hearing this. So developed countries have provided $80 billion is a claim which is being made by Dr. Mohammed. But there are 3-4 reports which clearly say it has hardly touched $10 billion. So these are mostly on paper, voluntary basis, and probably using different parameters. Some funds which have gone under some other activity are being added into climate finance. So there are questions have been raised about it. So here they are talking about voluntary carbon markets. So basically markets are being expected to pay for whatever initiatives which are being taken up in Africa. So this is one issue which have been raised by. And finally, it says Africa Carbon Markets Initiative, which is again a coalition of leaders, CEOs, and experts. So they have developed a roadmap on how to achieve or increase the voluntary carbon mechanisms markets in Africa, and so they have launched a activity basically in collaboration with various other groups to raise or implement this roadmap. So that was a report which was coming from UN climate change high level champion yesterday. Of course, that's a long report, but I'm just talking about a few important points which I thought are important. Then yesterday again, U.S. State Department, along with the Rockefeller Foundation and Jeff Bezos Earth Fund. I think most of you might know Jeff Bezos is one of the investors and he's a big, financial dealer in the US. So these three together, US State Department, Rockefeller Foundation, and Bezos Earth Fund, announced the creation of the Energy Transition Accelerator. So this is a program designed to generate funding through voluntary market carbon credits to help developing countries transition to cleaner sources of energy. So the shift to cleaner source of energy requires a lot of funds for developing countries. Like for in India, if you want to go beyond thermal power station and towards renewable energy, a lot of funds are required. I think that's where some of the projects in India are stuck because the banks are not ready to finance. So they think that there is a risk involved in that. So this energy transition accelerator is about generating funds for such transition projects. So this is again, I think it's an initiative by the US, which is under pressure to finance climate action. So they are trying to respond not by giving funds, but by creating market mechanisms. So we are not sure how far this will be accepted or how far this will go in helping the developing countries to shift to cleaner sources of energy. Now, there were other meetings as well. There was this a committee meeting on Green Climate Fund and Global Environment Facility. So both them together, and on Green Climate Fund, South Africa, they called for increasing the trust because, as I mentioned, trust has become a problem. The Green Climate Fund has been under implementation. There are some projects, but it is yet to gain some trust. So, like you were saying, Pakistan got, they are victims of floods, but they are not been able to get any support from Green Climate Fund. So, but whether what is Green Climate Fund is again a question which has been raised because some people felt it is deviating from its original character and being converted into a mere capacity or knowledge building entity. So this question was raised in the meeting yesterday. Similarly, Global Environment Facility, there was a oral report presented 2 days back, and there was a discussion on Global Environment Facility. So there again, there was divergence of views between developing countries and developed countries on JEF 8, the eighth phase of Global Environment Facility. So they wanted more funds under this to finance climate change as a focal area. But still, there are differences. I think a draft text which was circulated, they said that they'll finalize or they'll have a relook into it in a few days' time. There was another meeting on clean development mechanism. This is again basically related to carbon credits and carbon markets. So, number of suggestions were given in that meeting about relaxing the deadlines. Most of the project proponents thought deadlines cannot be met, so it is better to relax And then people were asking for revision in clean development mechanism methodologies. So, and then of course, there was a huge demand for a revision of re-revising methodologies under Article 6.4 mechanism. So, preventing exodus of activities to voluntary standards is another issue which was raised. And the bigger problem was about certified emission reductions. I think this is where there is a lot of questions being raised how these certified emission reductions can work, and unless they are transparent or very coming forth with the information sharing, so these CERs may not be helpful, is what some of the discussion felt. So these are some of the meetings which happened. Maybe finance, appears very, uh, among the technical discussions. Finance continues to be critical issue, but sometimes people get bored because working out the finance is being questioned, because where to get funds, how to get funds, and what are the mechanisms for funds. I think those are all being discussed, and some people feel that they are out of the box. I mean, they could not think what is happening here. So I think I know, as I mentioned yesterday, of course, a lot of other observers said this is a African COP, because a lot of African leaders came together, united to hold wealthy nations for their greenhouse gas emissions. So already Africa is facing the consequences of extreme weather, especially drought, which is putting a lot of people at the risk of starvation. We know in general Africa this keeps happening, but I think now the problem has become bigger and bigger. So, they are now looking for realization of promises which were made in COP26 and earlier conferences as well, especially the meeting which happened in Durban in South Africa almost a decade back, on the funds which will be provided by developed nations to Africa to respond to this starvation and hunger situation there. But even today, that promises have not been delivered, so they are asking for that. Now, significantly, recently, just I think this week, France has brought out a legislation. They said parking lot where cars are parked, if the parking lot includes 80 cars or more, then that should be compulsorily covered by solar panels. So they brought out a new legislation mandating solar panels for parking lots which are bigger by 80 cars or more. And someone has estimated that this means some 11 gigawatts of new solar power can come by this covering these parking lots. And this is as big as 10 nuclear reactors, new nuclear reactors. That means the potential of energy production through clean mechanism has just been raised by France by mere, they brought just one law, so that all the parking lots will be covered by the solar panels. This looks very interesting method of mandating the shift from conventional energy to alternative energy. Now, in terms of coming back to finance, I think US, when yesterday when they released this energy transition accelerator from conventional to clean energy, there were other issues which were looked at. One is the $11.4 billion annual climate finance commitment, which was given by Biden administration. So that is being expected to be delivered, fully delivered. And then, of course, reforming international finance institutions. Not only Bretton Woods, it should also include Asian Development Bank, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So various other financial institutions should be reformed is one of the demands coming from US as well. I mean, basically civil society from US and continuing to pool financial resources, including grants. So most expectations is that these will be a loan to whatever developing countries, but even grants are being asked to accelerate just the energy transition partnerships. So that these three issues have been flagged by US civil society. Now there is this initiative which is called Science-Based Targets Initiative, where at least 1,500 companies they have committed to net zero emissions. So I think now calls are being made that just by being part of this initiative, it does not mean that they are following up on the commitment. So now people are asking for because in the since governments are being asked to increase the reductions drastically. I think even here the companies are being asked to bring up more credible plans and with more transparent reporting on progress. So last year, the fashion industry, had a treaty, but we are not sure 1 year down the line how much of it has been implemented. I think that's still a question. So that's why these critics are saying unless companies provide that credible and transparent reporting, we will not believe them. So, but yesterday, interestingly, Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, he was actually listed by the US as wanted. So US thinks he is a drug smuggler, and they have announced a $15 million reward to capture him. But that was in 2020. But that call he continues to be on the website of US department. But yesterday, he shake hands with John Kerry, who is the US government representative at COP27. So this again was flagged by journalists and media as very significant because this Venezuelan president has almost been, declared as an international pariah, or more so that he should be captured and put in jail. But now, what made US and other countries to change their, stand with regard to him it was not yet announced. But I think observers are saying this is because Venezuela has a lot of oil. So basically, the US is probably trying to, get some favor from Venezuela by accepting the president as president. They are not accepted earlier. So they have accepted, and news says that this started with Emmanuel Macron. The meeting between Venezuelan president and president of France. Emmanuel Macron. So and then he followed it up with the meeting with John Kerry of US. So now I'll come to the comments or vignettes, which we could collect in the last 24 hours. A Colombian president, in fact, his speech was made 2 days back, but I got this recently, just today. Colombian President Gustavo Petro, he says, which is very again poignant point. He said the market is not the main mechanism to overcome the climate crisis. It's the market and the accumulation of capital that produced it, and it will never be its remedy. So now, as part of the finance, US, European Union, and all these big polluters, they are talking of market mechanisms rather than public support mechanisms. So, in that context, this comment by the Colombian president assumes significance because he said the market cannot be the mechanism to overcome the climate crisis because we reached this stage because of the markets. So he has declared his resistance to market-based actions which are dominating COP27 negotiations. And then there was this activist from Kenya who was very critical about funding as well. So he says, if wealthy nations are serious about Africa's future, this funding would go beyond the clever mathematics of loans and rerouted aid. So again, we can see that this manipulation of rerouting whatever was committed is being rerouted as part of climate finance. So there is this fake kind of finance being talked about as part of climate finance. So that is what he is pointing out. He said wealthy nations should be clean about what they are doing. Of course, there were comments which are continuing on the Egyptian president who is seen as suppressing human rights in Egypt, and at least 67 civil society members have been put behind bars. So some of the relatives of these persons behind bars, they are taking this COP27 opportunity to highlight their case, and they are demanding support from international civil society so that Egyptian government will release these prisoners of politics, or rather political prisoners. So there the comment is, like yesterday people are talking about Coca-Cola. So the hypocrisy of Coca-Cola supporting as a business partner. So here this hypocrisy being pointed out is COP27 is being hosted by a US-backed military dictator who overthrew Egypt's only ever democratically elected leader and effectively killed him in detention. So this is, the Egypt had several presidents in the past 20, 30 years. And the only democratically elected leader, he was overthrown by this US-backed military dictator. Now the president who spoke yesterday and day before in COP27. So that's the irony being pointed out about this president. Now, there was a significance, since we are still discussing finance. So there are discussions going on sectoral contributions, how much industry is contributing, how much energy sector is contributing, how much agriculture is contributing, and within agriculture, how much forests are contributing, land use contribution. So some people are saying this we should shift away from this sectoral accounting approach to a behavioral approach. So the current approach on both sources of emissions and sinks obfuscate the behavior that drives warming. So they say global warming is global warming is happening because of a larger contribution from all sectors. And if we start looking at sectoral accounting, I think we will not be addressing the problem. So it has to be more about behavior. What kind of behavior is pushing towards global warming? So there, two categories have been identified. One is mining and burning fossil carbon. So carbon is a fossil fuel, and mining and burning fossil fuel has been talked about, and poor land management. So they are trying to indicate that these two should be part of the overall approach rather than sectoral approach. And it seems yesterday there was a major sewage leakage on the COP27 conference premises. And delegates, they said it is stinking because all that sewage came out, and there was this leakage. So this again, brings us back to the kind of arrangements which were made in COP27. In Glasgow, we did discuss how the tents were developed, and then how the energy was being used. All these things we have discussed. In fact, we found at COP 27, sorry 26, they were they had a lot of AC air conditioners for the tent, and these air conditioners were the energy which was being supplied to that was through these generators, and these generators were being run on diesel. So this again hypocrisy was pointed out in COP26. Now here we don't know what kind of facilities were given, because there is no information being given out by Egypt, the Egyptian government. And of course, the food menu was also under discussion at Glasgow. Even here, a little here and there information came, like 2 days back, the food menu which was served to the global leaders included a lot of meat. So people who have been questioning meat and its role in carbon emissions, I think they were saying, how can you supply meat at this event, which is, concerned about global emissions. So, like every day, I think I'll share some of the interesting aspects. So this is again the venue of. Yesterday people said it is very hard to find hot food and water and trash cans, to throw away the waste, discard waste paper or whatever they might have. So they could not find any dustbin, to throw away. And many people said they went hungry because they could not find food. and they were thirsty because they could not find water as well. So that means the facilities, at the COP27 are now increasingly becoming the focus of attention, is what we can see. But this is a city where the COP27 venue has been erected. So this you can see a panoramic view of the Sharm el Sheikh city. Now this is we discussed day before also about Article 6.4, which talks about carbon removals. So they are saying the geoengineering, which is being proposed as one of the methods of carbon removal, is being questioned, and also the relaxation of the criteria are being raised as a concern, because these technologies can possibly help in increasing the destruction of ocean diversity. This has been raised, but there has been no response so far from either the supervisory body or even COP27 president. So as I mentioned, this is the reward which was announced on Venezuelan President Maduro. You can see that on the website of US website, $15 million offer, a reward to find him and capture him. But he was shaking hands with John Kerry and Emmanuel Macron yesterday at COP27. So people are seeing this as a patch-up of US with Venezuela, and probably because they are looking at the oil potential of Venezuela to supply to US, or maybe to control that. So even Maduro, I think he also requires that support. So there seems to be some sort of a deal between both of them, and there are now critics about this deal as well. So there is a big comment from George Monbiot. He said in the COP27 or even earlier COPs, no one was touching about livestock farming. And livestock farming, as done in US and Western nations, where large number of acres, acres and acres of trees are removed, and livestock farming is done, and they are fed food from supplied processed food is given to these livestock, and they are again cut, and meat is produced out of them. So this entire livestock farming is also a major source of greenhouse gases. But he says this is not at all under discussion in COP27. So I think that's what he thinks it should have been discussed. In fact, he is not there in COP27. He has been a writer, and I think he was also a parliamentarian. But he says, I don't want to go to, because I have to travel by plane, so I don't want to go to COP meetings. Now, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, who is the Pakistan Foreign Minister, he is there in COP27, and he was asking for justice. So in September, not now, in September, he said, what we seek is not charity, not arms, not aid, but justice. So same as loss and damage, the argument for loss and damage as a agenda. I think these kind of statements have helped that agenda to be discussed in COP27. So he says 33 million Pakistanis were affected by these floods. So that's a huge number of population which are affected, and it is again mostly in Balochistan and most backward areas of Pakistan. That's all the more problematic. So these are the pavilion of India. So you can see India at COP27. So there is a pavilion of India, and that was inaugurated by Bhupender Yadav, our Minister for Environment and Forests. So you can see he is doing the ribbon cutting. But this was done 2 days back. I'm just sharing it now here. We will discuss Indian delegation tomorrow. India has a delegation there, not only the minister, but this time the Prime Minister is not going there. So this again, as I mentioned yesterday, there was this launch of the report of high-level expert group on net zero pledges. So this was basically born out of Marrakesh partnership, but this include mostly non-state actors. So UN Secretary General has launched this report, and there was a meeting on that as well. So this another hypocrisy being highlighted, is when Greta Thunberg is questioning the world that you have stolen my dreams and my childhood. So she is still seen as a person coming from the rich country. But here you can see a child who is doing helping or working in a mine in cobalt mine in Africa. So the question this child is raising about how cobalt is helping electrical cars. So this again tries to raise issues about the solutions which are being given as to the problems of climate action. So cobalt mining is again a major problem in Africa and some parts of Latin America. Similarly, lithium. So all these are metals which are required for even the alternatives which are being talked about, including solar panels. So if some people might despair at such discussion, but I think we need to keep on questioning. So that is called deep questioning. Then there is this report which was released by World Resources Institute yesterday. So they were looking at mitigation ambition in nationally determined contributions and in relation with earlier indices. There were some updated national determined contributions and some were previous. So between 2015 and now, only a few, I think only 29 countries have updated their indices. Basically, that means they have set their goals higher than what they have committed in Paris. So this is a report which was brought out on that by WRA, and they say this, you can see this almost red color, and there are very few countries who have again submitted and which are much bigger than the ambition is bigger than what they have committed earlier. So, and there are some countries which are submitted, but there is no data. So again, that includes a large number in Latin America and a large number in Africa. Of course, their contribution is low, so it does not mean it changes the discussion, the scale of the discussion or finance and all other things. But somewhere here you can see between Asia and European continent, some countries have still not submitted. I think this will be a little more concern because they have not done anything. And there are a few other countries which have not submitted anything at all. So I think overall the blue dominates, but these are submissions which are made for more ambitious emission reductions. So they say, the World Resource Institute, they are expecting 6 actions from COP27. So these are the outcomes they are expecting, because this COP27 has been dubbed as implementation COP. So they say together for implementation. That's a slogan being given. So they are expecting, WRA expects from their analysis these 6 actions. One is creating a finance mechanism for addressing loss and damage. So by 18 November, they are expecting that a mechanism will emerge. I mean, that's what they're expecting. And then scale up support for adaptation. The adaptation support is there, but it has to increase. As I mentioned, Africa has been asking for overall $37 trillion of support. Then strengthen national emission reduction targets. Now this, we need to see what will happen. Tomorrow there is a Science Day, and I think IPCC and other UNEP and some other UN institutions, they are going to release reports, scientific reports tomorrow. So that is today, on 10th November. So we need to see, based on that, if national emission reduction targets will be redefined or they'll announce it afresh. I think that we need to see. And then they're actually looking at $100 billion climate finance to be made good. So it will be met and they'll move forward on new commitments. And advance the global stocktake to set pace for climate action. And then Glasgow climate commitments into action. This I found a little funny because the word treasure trove of Glasgow climate commitments. I thought this, what is the treasure trove? Because when we are seeing the final declaration at Glasgow, everyone felt very disappointed. So I was not sure what is this treasure trove which is being referred by WRA. So there has been this call by a few people about revision of 2030 emission targets. So this is mostly again by the rich countries. Most of them have given the reduction target by 2030. So if you want to reach that 1.5 degree, basically limiting global temperature to 1.5 degrees, there has to be, a revision and strengthening of these targets. So, as I mentioned, only 23 countries have come forward with new or updated NDCs since COP26, since last 1 year. One of them includes Switzerland, which we discussed 2 days back. Yesterday, Oxfam has released a report they call Carbon Billionaires. So this is about people, individuals who made money and they are now being dubbed as carbon billionaires. So this report, it's a short report, but we'll discuss some of the results of this report tomorrow. But this report says the world's richest people emit huge and unsustainable amounts of carbon, and unlike ordinary people, 50 to 70% of their emissions result from their investments. So this is about the investments which are being made by these rich people. So basically, the call is to divert their investment from activities which are helping in carbon emissions. So that's how they are being dubbed as carbon billionaires. So probably it includes Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, all these big richest people, including Ambani, Mukesh Ambani, Adani, all these billionaires. I think their investments are causing emissions. That is what this report is trying to say. So the investment diversion is being called for. So the study finds billionaire investments in polluting industries such as fossil fuels and cement, double the average for the standard and poor 500 group of companies. So this, I think most of these investments are in either fossil fuel companies, refineries, coal. So these are the places where their investments are there. So they want a commitment from these billionaires to divert their investments. So I'll stop here and I'll briefly speak in Telugu. నిన్న 9 నవంబర్ నాడు షర్మల్ షేక్లో ఎక్కువగా అంటే పూర్తిగా ఫైనాన్స్ మీద, అంటే నిధుల మీద, ఆర్థిక విషయాల మీద చర్చలు జరిగినాయి. నిన్నటి రోజు కూడా ఫైనాన్స్ డేగా ముందే ప్రకటించారు. అంటే రోజుకొక థీమ్ ప్రకటిస్తున్నారు. సో నిన్న అది నిధులు, తర్వాత ఆర్థిక వనరుల గురించి చర్చలు జరిగినాయి చాలా మటుకు. అనేక కమిటీ మీటింగ్లు అయినాయి, ఒక మినిస్టీరియల్ మీటింగ్ కూడా జరిగింది. ఇందులో 3 ప్రధాన విషయాలు ముందుకు వస్తున్నాయి. ఒకటేమో ప్యారిస్ అగ్రిమెంట్ మేరకు, ప్యారిస్ అగ్రిమెంట్లో అప్పుడు ధనిక దేశాలు $100 బిలియన్ ఆర్థిక సహాయము అందిస్తామని ప్రకటించారు, కానీ అది పూర్తిగా కార్యరూపం దాల్చలేదు. అది కార్యరూపంలోకి ఎట్లా తీసుకురావాలనేది ఒక అంశం అయితే, రెండోది అది దాటి అసలు అవసరమే ఎంత ఉంది, ఆ అవసరాన్ని గుర్తించి దాన్ని అంచనాలు వేసి ఆ మేరకు ఈ ఆర్థిక వనరులను ఎట్లా సమకూర్చుకోవాలనేది రెండో పాయింట్. మూడోది ఎవరు ఇవ్వాలి దానము అంటే, ఇదివరకు అయిన చర్చల్లో ఎవరైతే కాలుష్యం చేశారో హిస్టారికల్లీ, అంటే చరిత్రాత్మకంగా గత 100-150 ఏళ్ళ నుంచి కాలుష్యం కలుగజేస్తున్న దేశాలు ఈ నిధులు సమకూర్చాలని మొదటి నుంచి ఉన్న ఒక అభిప్రాయం, పొల్యూటర్ పేస్ ప్రిన్సిపల్ ఆధారంగా. అయితే ఇప్పుడు కొత్తగా దీని మీద కొద్ది సందిగ్ధత తీసుకొచ్చే ప్రయత్నము అటు బ్రిటన్ వుడ్స్, అంటే ఇంటర్నేషనల్ మానిటరింగ్ ఫండ్, వరల్డ్ బ్యాంక్ లాంటి సంస్థలు, తర్వాత కొన్ని ధనిక దేశాలు, అమెరికా లాంటి ధనిక దేశాలు ప్రయత్నిస్తున్నాయి. అంటే ఇందులో కొంత రాజకీయం మూడిబడి రాజకీయాలు తీసుకొచ్చే ప్రయత్నం చేస్తున్నారు. అయితే ఆఫ్రికా దేశాలు వాళ్ళు మాకు 3 రకాల పనులకు, కార్యకలాపాలకి నిధులు కావాలంటారు. ఒకటేమో లాస్ అండ్ డ్యామేజ్, అంటే ఇప్పటి అయిన నష్టానికి పరిహారం ఇవ్వాలనేది. రెండోది ఇప్పుడు జరుగుతున్న మార్పు, ఏదైతే విపరీత మార్పులు, వాతావరణ మార్పులు వస్తున్నాయి, వీటిని తట్టుకోవడానికి, తట్టుకునే విధంగా కొన్ని చర్యలు చేపట్టడానికి అడాప్టేషన్కి సంబంధించి నిధులు. మూడోది అసలు ఈ కాలుష్యం జరగకుండా, గ్రీన్ హౌస్ గ్యాసెస్ జరగకుండా ఆపడానికి, ప్రివెన్షన్కి, నివారణకు నిధులు కావాలని. సో వీటన్నిటినీ కలగలిపి వాళ్ళు దాదాపు $37 ట్రిలియన్ కావాలని వాళ్ళు అడుగుతున్నారు. ఇంకా వేరే స్వతంత్ర అధ్యయనాలేమో దాదాపు ప్రతి సంవత్సరము $1 ట్రిలియన్ కావాల్సి వస్తుంది ప్రపంచం మొత్తానికి, అంటే 2050 వరకు. అంటే ప్రతి సంవత్సరం $1 ట్రిలియన్ అంటే దాదాపు $28 ట్రిలియన్. ఇవన్నీ చూస్తే ఈ డబ్బులు, ఈ నిధులు ఎక్కడి నుంచి వస్తాయి అనేది ఒక పెద్ద సమస్యగా మారనుంది. అతిపెద్ద పొల్యూటర్స్ ఎవరైతే ఉన్నారో అమెరికా కానీ చైనా కానీ, వీళ్ళైతే ఇప్పుడు ఆడ చర్చల్లో లేరు. చైనా డెలిగేషన్ ఉన్నా కూడా చైనీస్ ప్రెసిడెంట్ లేడు, అమెరికా ప్రెసిడెంట్ లేడు, భారత ప్రధానమంత్రి కూడా లేడు. సో ఈ సందర్భంలో అసలు ఇక్కడ ఏం చర్చలు జరుగుతాయి, ఇవి ఏమన్నా పనికొచ్చే విధంగా ఉంటాయని ఒక సందేహం కూడా వ్యక్తపరుస్తున్నారు. ఇంకా అనేక రకాల మెకానిజమ్స్, పారామీటర్స్ దాటి మీద కూడా నిన్న చర్చలు జరిగినాయి. అది ఈరోజు అంటే 10th నవంబర్ నాడు దీన్ని మనం రేపు రివ్యూ చేస్తాము. ఈరోజు సైన్స్ డేగా గుర్తించారు. థీమ్ విజ్ఞాన దినంగా. అంటే ఈరోజు కొన్ని కొత్త రిపోర్ట్లు కూడా విడుదల చేసే అవకాశం ఉంది. ఆ రిపోర్ట్లలో ఏముంటుంది, దానివల్ల వాళ్ళు ఎట్లాంటి ఇది అందులో కనుక్కున్న ఫైండింగ్స్ ఏంటి అనేది కూడా చర్చలోకి వస్తుంది. అది రేపు పొద్దున మాట్లాడుకుందాం. ఏమన్నా clarifications if anyone wants, otherwise we'll close. Okay, thank you everyone.
Okay, thank you.